Welcome to Spartan Up Podcast. We are here in Boston at Brooklyn Boulders. I'm surrounded by my usual awesome people that you're going to find out about in just a second. But first, another awesome guy, Cal Fussman. So Cal Fussman, two-time best-selling author. More importantly, in the context of this, he writes for Esquire a piece called Things I've Learned. And watching this video, I learned a lot of stuff, actually. And I think
this was one of those podcasts that I didn't want to do. I didn't know who Cal Fussman was, and we've now become friends. You guys are going to love this one. Cool. This is an awesome podcast. And just so we can let you know who we are again, Joe, you know, of course, Johnny, Sefra, Tim, Marion, and Cal. Let's go see Cal.
In the military, that's called undue command influence.
Which is
when he told us what we would like.
We are here in an undisclosed location for Spartan Up Podcast with Cal Fussman. Famous, you're famous pretty much, right? I mean, you did those Tim Ferriss podcasts. You're starting your own podcast.
Yeah.
That thing's coming on soon, Fast and Furious. You excited about that?
I'm very excited, but it's amazing because we're sitting here and this is exactly how I learned to do what I do, which is interview people. I've been writing for Esquire for almost 20 years now, doing a column called What I've Learned. And I interview people who've lived extraordinary lives, from Mikhail Gorbachev to Muhammad Ali,
right,
Donald Trump. And I get an hour and a half to ask them anything I wanted.
That's awesome.
It's just to see what they learn.
Yeah.
And the column is written all in their words, so it's just all pure wisdom. I just look for the wisest things. Nobody really has to worry about a gotcha moment or me going in to hurt them.
Sure.
It's really what you were talking about before, giving somebody a couple of tools to make their life better.
There must be a couple of nuggets in there that you're like, wow, you know, I got to do that more. I mean, the one big one I'm getting just from you is it pays to talk to people in such an authentic way that you engage them, and it might even, you know, and it leads to a relationship.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
Well, like rule number one, ask a canned question, you're going to probably get a canned answer.
Yeah, right.
The better your question, probably the better the answer.
Right.
I always bring, Muhammad Ali was a childhood hero of mine. And when people ask, what did you learn from him? The moment that really hit me was I asked him what his definition of evil was. And he said, unfriendliness. I thought that was, yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
There are so many people that when that question comes at me, my mind just starts scatter shooting in a million directions. Sure. But like Jack Welch taught me that everything is like baseball when you're a kid. Like you choose up sides and you got your captains, and he said it's no different from when you get to the top of General Electric. Michael Eisner told me the same thing. He says all high school. And so
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
Keeping, if you keep that in mind.
Keep it simple.
Yeah. Well, that's probably the
right.
biggest
takeaway. Yeah.
The simpler, like, and maybe does this apply when you're running across the snow in Alaska for a great distance? Just keeping it one simple step after the next, as opposed to letting...
Well, it could become very overwhelming. You don't think about the next day or week, or as I'm sure with your travel, the same thing happened. You get to a place, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, you get to a place where you just want water, food, and shelter, as I'm sure you were there during your journey. And it's very, very refreshing to get there, right? You don't have the burdens of life,
Right. Yeah.
right? And it really is like, I just got to take the next step. I just got to just keep moving forward.
You know, when you said that, I had a flashback to a moment when I was in Rio de Janeiro. I had just arrived, and I'm feeling, I had like a little money in my pocket, not that much. And I get on a bus and I'm just in like short pants, t-shirt, and this little money. And even like a paper copy of my passport. It's all I have with me. And I'm on this bus, and to get on the bus, they had like turnstiles in the back, and you would have to like put in a coin or pay a guy by the turnstile. And so I come through the turnstile, I'm sitting down, and I'm thinking, man, like, this is amazing. This is amazing. I am like the freest man in the world. I have no job, I have no boss. I have this whole day. I have enough money for a month. I am completely free. And as I'm thinking this, about 4 kids from the street who have only a pair of shorts on, nothing else, they're in bare feet, they like come scooting under this turnstile laughing, and they come into the bus, and I said, oh man, they're freer than I am.
That's right. They had you. There's always somebody to one-up you.
Yeah, and you never know how.
No.
But I learned a lot about freedom.
Yeah.
On
well,
the
you
trip.
were pretty free, and I think as I'm listening to, I'm thinking what's the right word I'm looking for? The reason most of us aren't free is because of the things we're chasing and creating. They are keeping us locked up, really, right? You don't own stuff; it owns you.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah. And we were talking about monks before we started.
Yeah.
I met this monk for a walk yesterday, and we were talking about the subject because, like, I have this desire to meet as many new people as I can. And he does a lot of traveling, and he talks to people. He's building an ashram. But his point was, when I'm home, I don't want to try and meet anybody new because I've been reincarnated so many times. I've already met him. I said, what?
That's interesting.
Yeah, and we got into some really deep conversation because I had this unique experience. First time this ever happened to me the other day where a friend of mine I was working with, I showed up in his house, we're getting a little work done, and I hadn't been there in a few months, and he's got a kid about 1 year old.
Yeah.
And so the last time I saw the kid, he was on mommy and daddy's shoulder, and now the kid is walking toward me in diapers, and I couldn't believe it. It's like, what? And then the kid looked at me and he said, what? I looked at him, what? He looked back at me, what? And instantly, we were friends.
Yeah.
So I was telling the monk about this, and I was saying, like, wow, to have a friend based on this power of curiosity.
Sure.
Like, I saw him, I was so curious about what had happened to him, and then he saw me react, and he was so curious, and the monk said, no, you knew him in a past life. You were already friends before. And then he made a really interesting point. He said, think of it this way. Just say you could go on vacation to Africa. You're in Kenya, and you're watching the lions and the zebras, and you come back home. What do you talk about for the next 3 or 4 days? The lions and the zebras. That's just the way it is with people. They pass on and they get reincarnated, and then they can't really talk when they're 1 year old, but they're trying to tell you about the zebra. So
where was he from, this monk?
He did his monk training in Hawaii.
Doesn't really sound like rough training.
No, I think he was silent for a long time. And this guy is deep.
Yeah?
His name is Dan DePani.
I know Dan.
You know?
I know Dan.
Yeah. Come on.
I know Dan. I interviewed him. Yeah.
Dan DePani has been on the show?
Yeah, he has a very expensive robe. I know Dan.
Oh, man.
I know Dan.
Oh, man. The beads, the
Yeah,
robe.
he was sweeping for years. I know. I know Dan.
This is true. You're not putting me on.
Not putting you on. No.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
He's wonderful.
Good man.
He's a
Good man.
wonderful guy.
But I got to tell you, I'm in Japan now. I told you I moved to Japan. And I heard about these marathon monks. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
No.
So every group of monks has their own way of entering and being approved and, you know, getting your seal of approval that you're a monk. And so this group makes you do like a 25-mile hike with sandals on and praying with your robe. And once you've done that for 150 days, 100 days, then they know you're serious and you're committed. And so then you come in and you say, look, I finished my 100 days, I wore the sandals, I did 25 miles a day every day, I prayed. And they say, all right, good job, now we know you're serious. Take this sword. You've got 800 more days. If you decide to quit, you kill yourself on the course. So that's why I joke a little bit about Dan, because I'm like, dude, I met the real guys. And I went to see I did the course. And I saw the tombstones along the way from the guys that quit and killed themselves. And then I see the big, beautiful monuments that showcase the people that did the full 900 days. There's one guy that did it twice. He did 1,800 days because he felt that he had done such terrible things in World War II that he needed to cleanse his soul, and that was the way he did it.
Whoa.
Yeah, so tell Dan next time you see him, say, Dan, when you knock out 900 days in Japan, then I know you're a real monk.
Oh,
let's take a break.
Okay.
You and I will meditate for a half hour, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
For today's break, a tip from Spartan SGX. Did you know you could be walking up to 40 more miles per week just by standing at your desk, walking during phone calls, parking farther away from your job, and staying active throughout the day? 10,000 steps a day is a great challenging goal for most people and will really help build your muscle endurances for those long Spartan races. Become unstoppable. Spartan SGX training.
Meditating is tough, right? I mean,
I can't meditate.
you can't meditate.
No, I don't.
I used to say that to my mother. My mother used to meditate for
Yeah.
like a week straight, fasting. My grandfather used to break down the door and come. Yeah, she was like out there. You interview people.
Yeah.
That's your thing.
And I really started to learn about interviewing when I was traveling around the world as a kid.
Huh.
I say kid, 23, 24. And I had no money, or very little money. So what I do is I get a ticket at the bus station, at the train station, to the next destination. Didn't matter where it was going, because what mattered to me was the trip down the aisle. Right. I'm looking for somebody like you.
To talk to.
Somebody who's curious, somebody I think I could trust, somebody I think will trust me, to sit down in the empty seat. Because by the end of the ride, I needed you to invite me home, because otherwise I had no roof over my head.
Ah.
And that's how I kind of got passed around the world for about 10 years. I started out as a journalist, and I wrote for newspapers in Miami, St. Louis. It was my dream to go to New York. I found this amazing startup. It's called Inside Sports.
Yeah.
And it's back in the early 80s. And it's just a phenomenal place to be a young writer, because it attracted Hunter Thompson and
How old are you now?
I was like 22,
22.
23 at the time.
Nice. And
Yeah.
you're writing with Hunter Thompson.
Well, I was talking to him. I wasn't writing at that level, but I got to be at the bar, throw back shots, and
Nice.
have a good time. And next day, you're flying off to see an NFL championship game. And then suddenly, like a lot of startups, it was an artistic success, but it went belly up. So that's when I decided to take some time and travel around the world. And that trip took me a lot of places for about 10 years.
But you had no money.
Very little money. And that was part of the charm of it, because it forced me to interact with people day after day, not knowing who I was going to bump into. That just ignited like the sense of curiosity.
But so for 10 years, you're bouncing around the world, very little money, and nowhere to sleep. And so you're hoping that you're going to end up on somebody's couch. And there were days that didn't happen.
Well, there were more. What happened after a while is once you make your first connection, a party breaks out. I'm basically at that point an excuse for a party.
Right.
And so once the party breaks out, now there are 30 people there who either want to take me in or send me to their uncle 3 towns over.
Right.
So after a while,
You're on a roll.
Yeah, I was on a roll.
Did you track this whole 10-year journey?
No, you know what? Strangely, certainly in the beginning, I didn't even take a camera because I didn't want to like stop and say, okay, I'm a tourist here. Let's take our photo. Let me put my arm around you. I just wanted everything to be natural and just to keep moving with the current of my life. And now, of course, I wish I had all those pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, what was I thinking? What was I thinking?
You're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can't even, sometimes I'll think of a place and I'll try and remember the person's name, but it's 30 years ago.
Yeah, right.
And there were so many people.
How many countries?
You know what? I didn't sit down and count them, but like definitely more than 50 or so.
Wow.
Yeah. And this Arctic Circle, herding reindeer, was in the middle of Africa, mountain gorillas, prospected for gold in the Amazon. It was an adventure.
That's a very good adventure.
I saw in the Sahara, I saw one of those races across the Sahara.
Through,
yeah, that was very cool.
Marathon des Sables, probably.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And I don't...
Mary runs that race. Yeah.
Even watching it, I don't know how people do it.
Yeah, well, you know, God forbid, you and I were in a car accident.
Yeah.
Or a camel accident. And we had to, and we had to make our way across the desert to survive. You do.
That's a good point.
Right?
So, but is there something that you put in your head to do it, or is it the circumstance that makes you do it?
Well, you put it in your head to get started, just like you did, I think, to get on that first bus.
Yeah, there's a big similarity here. It's, right. And then it becomes addictive, too. Is
exactly.
it the same thing? Wow.
I mean, you were in a giant race. You were in a 10-year, adventure. And most people would never get started on that, right? You start thinking about all the reasons why you wouldn't do that. Well, I want to feel productive. That sounds unproductive. But actually, sitting here next to you, you win. You know what I mean? Like, you chose, who gets to do that? You chose the better path.
But it wasn't a 10-year odyssey when it started. When it started, it was like 3 weeks. And then, it just kept going, and it keeps going. And then all of a sudden, the idea of waking up and not knowing what's going to happen becomes big juice, because you treat each day like it's a unique experience. You don't know, is this the day I'm going to meet the woman of my dreams?
Yeah. Well, if you think way back, right, we would just hope that the sun rose the next day. Right.
Yeah.
So you appreciate every day.
And I can remember, you were talking about the Sahara. I remember like looking at the stars there.
Yeah.
No pollution. It's
pristine,
hundreds or thousands of miles away, and just thinking, man, this is the way somebody saw the stars like 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that just kept driving me and driving me. What was the moment in your childhood that set you on this path?
So my mother brought me to a race in Queens, probably not far from Deer Park where you are. That's a 3,000-mile run in Forest Hills around a 1-mile loop.
What?
1 mile.
I never heard of this.
1 mile loop, yep. And the Transcendence Run. And about 8 people sign up for this thing, and it's about 90 days, and they just sit there and they go around this 1 mile loop every day, all day. And so you see that as a kid, Queens kid, right? And you're like, man, the possibilities. The mind is an unbelievable thing.
Hold it. Whoa. I live very close. I never heard of this.
Oh yeah, you look it up. Look, you're updated now. You have a phone. The Transcendence Run.
And it still goes on?
It still goes on, yeah.
And people they're running. Are
Around
they
a one-
taking time off to go to sleep, or they?
Yeah, they could go to sleep if they want, but you know, it's like an honor system. I mean, I don't know.
Oh, you just put it in,
Yeah,
or
you
like
put it
golf.
in.
Yeah, okay.
I don't. These days it might be a little more advanced, but there were only 10 people or less. She's shaking. I could see why Tim Ferriss brought you back. You're a lot of fun to talk to. I'm gonna have you back.
Okay. You know what? I got a lot to learn from you.
We're gonna have some fun.
That's beautiful.
All right.
All right.
Good
I'll
stuff.
see you in Japan.
See ya.
Cal, he's a guy that might have a similar travel agent that I do. I love it. It's kind of like that Jack Kerouacian. This is why all Spartans should journal so you can remember your life. He says, wish I wrote it down. Take 5 minutes a day. Write what you did that day. It's a really powerful tool. So I learned a lot from this guy. I mean, listen, he starts out at 22 hanging out with Hunter S. Thompson. And he's like, where do you go after that? It's like, yeah, you travel on the road for a decade. Makes sense to me.
Well, it's funny. Something I took out that I thought was pretty cool is, it could be chalked up as a misspent youth, some of the adventures and things along the way, except that he had, I think, a plan. And the plan was he was going to gather these experiences. He was going to create a context from which he could draw. And he went on to write a couple of best-selling books, one about Jackie Robinson, one about Vegas. He writes this very successful column which distills life lessons from other very successful and famous people, and then he shares them with us. So I think it's really neat that he's found a way to harness all that energy. Because there are a lot of people out there who have this energy, this go, 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 and if they don't find a way to then tie it to a purpose, it is misspent, right?
Well, yeah, but I tell you, so he got on the bus and he just walked down the aisle and he's looking for a guy to talk to, right? Yeah. See, I would have been the guy looking for a guy like him not to talk to, right? I would have been
a mean one,
yeah,
Mr. Grinch.
I would have been the guy like, you are not sitting next to me, bud. Keep moving.
But guess what?
I'm sure I met a few people like that.
But what I'm saying is he's evolved, right?
Sure.
And I believe I have as well, because I end up, my wife always talking to me, my kids talk to me. I mean, I talk to a lot of people. And a lot of strange people, and a lot of, I just bump into people. And
we have some of them on film. You're talking to them.
So I think we all kind of maybe merged. But when he was talking about his earlier journeys, I don't know. That's just, I grew up at Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. And first year I lived there, I was, I don't know, like 16. I didn't actually have a house or anything. I just went down for the summer. I did the same thing. I would just walk up and down the boardwalk all night long. Right? And then I would just talk to people and just look for the kindness of strangers kind of stuff. Just one, because I found out that if you slept on the beach in the daytime and walked at night, you're okay. But if you reverse that, you'd get arrested.
Excellent point.
Right?
Wow,
So that's...
This is a part of your history we didn't know.
There's a lot you don't know. So anyway, interesting guy. And
You know what you guys didn't experience is when you're with him, he's mesmerizing. He pulls you right in. You
must be the hat.
You wanted, yeah, it's the hat. You just want to hang out and talk to him. So you could see how he would convince people. Maybe not you.
No, I'm saying now he would.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
But 10 years ago, no.
but that's a learned skill.
20
Like,
years
he
ago,
talks
whatever.
about the fact that he would put himself in a situation where he had to count on that charm. He didn't have the money, so he had to have other resources. So that's a learned skill for sure. I don't think that's just innate.
Big takeaways?
I loved, and it really resonated with me when he said he's happiest when he doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Because a lot of people talk about having a plan and working a plan, and of course that's important.
Love it.
But the other idea about getting in your comfort zone, and like when these guys showed up, I know you just had Nagoji in Japan.
Yeah.
And these guys showed up, and you just said, let's go, and handed them
kettlebells.
Handed them kettlebells and had them running through all kinds of strange situations. And that idea, that adventure, that being remarkable, is huge. And that's coming up again and again. We get into these themes where we get talking to people and something comes up again and again. And it seems to be a big one right now is be willing to take a chance, put yourself out there, don't know what the outcome is going to be, and just do it anyway. And so his idea saying that he's happiest when he doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow, I got that.
Well, it's not scripted, and he's a writer.
Yeah, sure.
So he wants to write it.
Yeah, sure.
So go ahead.
No, it's a great point. I'm just supporting I'm supporting.
Please finish my sentence for me.
We're good.
Blah, 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 blah.
We're good.
No. But he says, and even though you don't know what's happening next day, be conscious about the things that you create, right? And when you're talking about the script in your head, be careful of that, because you can shift that paradigm. Because if it's not a positive script, that you need to break it, you need to change it, you need to do something else and imprint it with a new memory that floods it with all those good whatevers.
I'd like you to imprint upon our listeners what they should do now.
I believe you should go to YouTube or iTunes or wherever you'd like to come check out some more podcasts and go travel on a bus and meet some new people.
See if you can find Tim.
Find Tim.
That would make it interesting.
Thank you for watching another epic story of success. If you like our message, please share Spartan Up with your friends and subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you catch our show, maybe in the woods. Spartan Up is brought to you by Spartan Race. To find a race near you, visit Spartan.com.